Shalom and welcome to Jerusalem Studio. As the year 2018 is drawing to a close, it is time to look back and focus on the main events and trends pertaining to Jerusalem security and foreign policy and its regional involvement. To further discuss this topic, we're joined here in the studio by Brigadier General in Reserve Yossi Kuperwasser, who is the Project Director on Middle East Developments at the Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs. Welcome.
Thank you.
I'd like also to welcome our TV7 analyst, Mr. Amir Oren, and Lieutenant Colonel in Reserve Reuven Ben Shalom, who is a cross-cultural strategist and a columnist at the Jerusalem Post. Welcome. Mr. Oren, we'll start with the first topic.
Just in an overall fashion, Israel in its 71st year of existence is a status quo power. While it doesn't have an official, formal, declared policy, one can see that what it really aims at is no peace, no war. It doesn't want to pay the heavy price of peace that its interlocutors would demand, and it sees no point in war because it doesn't have any aims to expand or to change the regimes of neighboring countries, or at least it doesn't think that it is worth its while. And therefore, what it tries to do is balance the risks and rewards of the way it conducts its defensive posture, sometimes by offensive means, on various fronts. Let's start with the northern front, which one can divide into the Syrian sector and the Lebanese sector. And when we say Lebanon, we mean Hezbollah.
Of course, there is the Northern Shield operation ongoing, in which the IDF is trying to locate and thwart Hezbollah dug tunnels or subterranean passageways. General Kuperwasser, when we're talking about this challenge, to what degree is Israel successful in its operation, and is it worried about possible escalation with Hezbollah with Iranian backing on the matter?
Well, we are always worried. Israel is always worried about all potential possibilities around it, especially in the north, where major development in this year was that Hezbollah and Iran won the war for Assad in Syria and forced the opposition to leave the Golan Heights. And we have a new situation along the Golan Heights, and are trying to establish a ground route that will enable them to reach from Iran to Hezbollah to Lebanon. They didn't manage to do that so far, fortunately. And this is in the context of trying to establish a real threat towards Israel from the northern front, both from Syria and from Lebanon, in the context of the growing threat that Iran is experiencing following the decision of the Americans in 2018 to leave the JCPOA and the Iran deal, and to reimpose the sanctions over Iran. All of that is interconnected. Mm-hmm. Now, what Israel has been trying to do in the last couple of years, and even more so in the last year, was to limit the capabilities of the Iranians through Hezbollah and directly to threaten Israel's security in the northern front. And we had some considerable successes. Although we didn't win the war, the battle yet, it's still an ongoing battle, but we managed to have considerable successes. First of all, we did manage to cause Iran many difficulties in delivering the systems that are supposed to improve the precision of the weaponry of Hezbollah in Lebanon. Hezbollah has more than 100,000 rockets, but most of them are statistical rockets. And the main effort is to bring in systems that will enable them to make these rockets much more precise. Mm-hmm. Israel has managed to stop much of these weapons on the way from Iran to Lebanon when they were on Syrian soil, and is now fighting a war political war in order to convince Lebanon to prevent Hezbollah from producing these weapons in Syria. In Lebanon. The other thing that we have done is to deprive Hezbollah from one of the jewels of their structure of war against Israel, which is the tunnels. And this is not only important in the context of the capabilities of Hezbollah to launch a war, it is also very embarrassing for Hezbollah because it proves that Hezbollah is actually working under Iranian dictate and putting Lebanon in danger. Mm-hmm. And it's since Hezbollah is both an Iranian organization and a Lebanese organization, this puts it in the tension between these two elements of its identity are colliding with each other, and this is something very difficult for Hezbollah to live with. And finally, just one word.
Shortly.
Israel is trying to leverage this development in order to put political pressure on Hezbollah, in order to convince the world to take action against Hezbollah, especially the European Union, which has to consider whether they will look at Hezbollah as a terror organization, not only on the military wing. And UNIFIL is also under a lot of pressure because this exposes how weak and unable to perform its mandate UNIFIL is. So they have to work out a way, and we'll see in 2019 if something changes.
Colonel Ben Shalom?
I think that 2018 was the year of discovering, of realizing the truth behind the masks, or tearing away the masks. This is true for probably every subject we're going to discuss today, including the North. For years, Israel's big campaign was to try to expose realities, tell the world, please look at what's going on. Understand that these, for instance, are not only our enemies, but they threaten the entire West. Please, UNIFIL, the United Nations Interim Force in Lebanon, please realize what Hezbollah are doing in the south. And then UNIFIL would tell us, we don't locate anything. So this was always our wish, that everyone will see the reality. And I think 2018 was the year of discovery. Many things have been exposed. The tunnels, for instance, of course, is probably the biggest exposure of the activities of Hezbollah to penetrate Israel, because in fact, these tunnels do penetrate Israel, so they already violated our sovereignty. And the last few days, UNIFIL is going down there with cameras, and they say, yeah, okay, we see it. The problem is that all of these understandings, all of these revelations don't bring us closer to solving these issues. Mm-hmm. Also here, I think it's going to be interesting to go through all these topics. We're not going to solve the North. The North is going to war, if you ask me. Albert Einstein says, as long as there is man, there will be war. And there will be war in the North, especially because Hezbollah has amassed so many weapons, so many capabilities. They still need to promote their image of the protectors of Lebanon, even though they are the destroyers of Lebanon. The pressure is mounting on them internally, and I think eventually this will erupt. The difference now in Israeli policy is that we're not waiting around anymore. We're not defining quiet as our goal, but we're slowly thwarting and preempting things and laying the groundwork for the next confrontation as much as possible to take away strategic capabilities when it happens.
The added element in the North is the Russian one.
Well, I'd like to, before we come to the Russian element, which is a significant part of Israel's ability to exert pressure, not only on Hezbollah, but on its patron Iran, is the interesting fact that Hezbollah has, to a certain degree, adopted Hamas's courses of action, using tunnels not only for smuggling purposes, but also for cross-border attack tunnels, and also, according to various reports and indications, that it's also a domestic installation or network of subterranean tunnels that will be employed in the next conflagration. To what degree does one learn from the other, and where does it actually limit the ability to confront Israel in the next escalation?
Well, obviously, there is an exchange of ideas. They learn from each other, sometimes directly, sometimes they go to a third venue, such as Turkey, to learn in a sort of a workshop. But what really happened is not so much Hezbollah emulating Hamas, but Israel emulating its own success in the south. Because what happened in the south was that once Israel withdrew, first in 1995, right after the Oslo and Cairo agreements, and then it put up a fence, and then later on it put on the obstacle, then Hamas could no longer just cross the border above ground and started digging tunnels, also under the military outposts in Gaza itself, until Israel withdrew. In the north, until several years ago, when Israel started shaping the terrain by putting obstacles, by cutting the foliage and several other changes to make it harder for Hezbollah to operate in battle, there was no need for Hezbollah to do it. They could have bypassed Israel from the sea or from the air or in various ways. Now that they must work harder, they indeed started copying the Hamas version of underground the tunnels.
With regard to the Russian element, of course, there was last week a meeting between the executive chairman of the Jewish Agency, Mr. Yitzhak Herzog, who formerly was the opposition leader here in Israel, with Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, during which the Russian top diplomat indicated that business has resumed as usual when we're talking about the coordinated mechanism or military mechanism for Israeli deconfliction with Russian forces in Syria. To what degree this has been, of course, a story of the last 3 months since September, when the IL-20 reconnaissance aircraft of the Russian military was downed by Russian-made surface-to-air missiles in the Latakia area. What has happened with this regard, and how does this rapprochement, if you will, between Israel and Russia assisted in Israel safeguarding its security interests, both in Syria but also in Lebanon, with regard to Hezbollah, specifically the subterranean tunnel network?
Well, the Russians, of course, have several target audiences in their public diplomacy or propaganda. What they declared right after the downing of the Ilyushin, and even after Israeli Air Force Chief Amikam Norkin visited Moscow and briefed his counterparts, was one thing. This was intended for the domestic Russian audience and for the Syrians more than for the professional military, because when you hear what transpired during the briefings themselves, they had no problem with it. The Russians knew full well that the Syrians acted amateurishly and were not disciplined enough to fire only at the targets at which they were supposed to aim. The Israeli planes were no longer there. And after a hiatus of a couple of months, the channel, the deconflicting channel, was renewed. Israel gives some more details when it strikes. There were not as many strikes because the Iranians also limited their transfer of weapons.
General Kuperwasser.
I think what happened was that Russia realized how dangerous the Iranian activities are for its own security. And that's, in my mind, what brought what Amir mentioned, the reduction in the Iranian transfer of weapons to Syria, which enabled Israel to be less active and by that avoid the possibility of clash with the Russians.
The reduction or the use of alternative routes?
They tried to use alternative routes. We saw twice the Iranian aircraft flying directly to Beirut. And Israel, as I said before, is trying to convince the Lebanese and to put pressure on the Lebanese to avoid the idea of allowing the Iranians to improvement systems, improvement kits for the Hezbollah rockets in Lebanon. We'll see whether it's going to work or not. Of course, on the surface, the Lebanese are denying that this is happening, but they know the truth, and they will have to decide what they're going to do. Israel is not shy on saying that if they are not going to take care of that, Israel will take care of that militarily. So this option that Reuven mentioned before of clash is still there if the Iranians are going to play a higher risk game. But of course, if they're going to play it, it's going to be in a different context because Israel has told them that we know about it in advance. We took away the tunnels, which makes their capabilities lesser, and beyond that, there's this. Reuven spoke about the time of revealing all kinds of secrets. Israel has proven in this year, in several cases, its intelligence dominance. We not only are able to know all kinds of things, we are able to take action based on what we know. And the bringing over from Tehran of the trove of the documents that were in the nuclear archive, and the exposure of the tunnels all speak of the capabilities of Israel in the intelligence field, and this is very important because it's an extremely important element in the deterrence of Israel vis-a-vis its adversary.
Colonel Ben Shalom?
I think Russia is pretty simple. They have interests and they will promote them with a cold calculation. The revealing here, in my view, is our understanding that maybe we didn't understand the Russians enough. The whole issue of downing the plane, we played along, as if the Russians are angry, and now we're insulted that they're angry. And it was in a way a game, because I think now we understand that these are the Russians. It's not that they were really totally devastated with the plane. They used this as an excuse to promote their interests as far as the shipment of the S-300.
Mr. Oren, I'd like to move to the next topic. The Gaza Strip has been a hot topic during 2018. Hundreds of acres, if not thousands of acres, were burnt by incendiary kites and balloons. There have been several instances of sporadic rocket fire with 48 hours of more than 460 rocket fires, close to a all-out war between Israel and the Islamist organizations in the Palestinian enclave, and a U-turn with the resignation of Defense Minister Avigdor Lieberman and the assumption or ascension of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to take that post as well. Tell us more about that.
Well, let me first talk about the common denominator between the Northern Front, about which we just talked, and the Southern Front. The most traumatic event in Israel's history, perhaps except for the Rabin assassination, has been the Yom Kippur War. And the Yom Kippur War unfolded the way it did because the Israeli Air Force could not fulfill the expectations from it to have a decisive blow. And it couldn't do it because of the surface-to-air missiles. Now, the analogy to that, which Hezbollah and Hamas have learned, is that they must either neutralize the Israeli Air Force because they know that Israel will be reluctant to send ground forces, or if not, to draw in the ground forces. And therefore, when Yossi Kuperwasser and Reuven Ben Shalom talk about the precision project, which the Lebanese want for their missiles, what they need are missiles, a barrage of missiles to hit Israeli Air Force bases, not Israeli population centers, not even Israeli infrastructure assets such as power stations, but the Israeli Air Force bases. And up to now, they have less than 20 such precision-guided rockets.
In Lebanon.
In Lebanon. Now, Hamas doesn't have that much of an arsenal, but Hamas wants to provoke Israel when the time is ripe from its perspective, and it is not right now, to draw Israeli forces into Gaza, because Israel has already told the world it doesn't want to occupy Gaza. It knows that it would have to feed the population and then reestablish the infrastructure there. So these are two different fronts, but with some common elements.
General Kuperwasser?
Well, I think that what we see in Hamas policy is that they have a different policy for Gaza and a different policy for the West Bank. In Gaza, to find a way of provoking Israel so that Israel will speak with the Egyptians, so that they will speak with the Palestinian Authority, so that the Palestinian Authority will give them money. That was the name of the game. And they want to do it in a way that would not provoke Israel to the point that Israel will take harsh steps against them, but will treat them mildly. And they managed to do that. Israel spoke with the Egyptians, who spoke with Abu Mazen, who refused to do what Hamas expected them to do. And eventually this problem was solved by Qatar. Qatar went in, came with the money, and are delivering money to the Hamas impoverished Gaza Strip, and that's the solution of that problem. And that's why we managed to reach something called regularization or whatever, which puts some order into the Gaza Strip. Israel doesn't want to intervene there more than that Hamas wants us not to intervene. What happens is that during this 8 months of ongoing provocation, Israel came closer and closer to the point of losing its temper. And Hamas realizes, and I think everybody should realize, that if they go too far with this provocation, Israel is now very close to the point in which they can say, okay, we had enough. And that happens once in a while, that we have enough. It happened in Lebanon in 2006. It happened in Gaza 3 times since then. We have enough. It happened in Operation Defensive Shield in 2002. At a certain point, Israel has enough, and then uses its force. This may happen if Hamas will keep playing the game. So in the West Bank,
you mentioned, I'm sorry, you mentioned Lieberman and Netanyahu. In the Israeli system of coalition government, the cabinet, as a group, some 8 ministers, including the prime minister and the minister of defense, is the decision-making body. And it didn't really matter whether Lieberman was for or against certain actions, because Netanyahu, chief of staff Eisenkot, and the entire cabinet made the decision.
I'll be short and stick to my theme of the revelations. It has been discovered that Israel doesn't hold many assets when it comes to a leverage on Hamas. I'm not going to say we lost. I'm not going to say we necessarily showed weakness, but demonstrated that there's a limit to what we can do because we don't want to conquer them. They play the mind game brilliantly. At the end of 2018, they are emboldened. They are in a way on the rise when the Palestinian Authority is on the down. So it's not a very good situation for us to tell them now, be careful, because next time if you push it too much, we're going to invade. I think in a way they can tell that we're bluffing. So we have to be very calculated with the leverages that we have on Gaza, because there are not many.
Well, we'll actually establish a specific show about the Gaza Strip and the situation with Hamas.
I think we have the capabilities, and we don't have an incentive good enough to do that.
Because we're trying to recap on 2018 right now. The next element I'd like to touch on Jordan, actually. There were certain situations with Jordan where the relations haven't been at the high of the fluctuating bilateral relations between the two countries. Nevertheless, Israel views Jordan as a vital component in its national security, especially for the fact of having such a long border between Israel and Jordan with very hostile forces beyond that. Mr. Oren.
Well, ever since the Six-Day War, Israel has been of two minds regarding what to do with the West Bank of the Jordan River, or Judea and Samaria, as it is called by Israelis, whether to keep all of it, part of it, and if to return it to Arab control, whether to do it with the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan or let the Palestinians control it. And as Israel was still wondering what to do, Jordan decided on disengagement, not from Jerusalem. In Jerusalem, it does see a stake for itself, but from the West Bank. If you look not at the political echelon, but at the professional echelon of security, military, intelligence officials, the cooperation is excellent because Jordan is vital to Israel's security and vice versa.
General Kuperwasser.
I think two things happened this year. First of all, there was the direct relationship with Jordan had 2 points. On the one hand, we resumed full diplomatic relations. We placed the ambassador over there, and this was a good development. And the other, they decided not to activate the option of prolonging the leasing of the Naharaim area and all of that, and we are approaching a problem with that. We are trying to fix it. But I think the more important thing that happened is that whereas in the past Jordan was our best friend in the Arab world, it is no more. Mm-hmm. This is something that the Jordanians have to grasp. Mm-hmm. Because today, Netanyahu, he never goes to Amman, but he does go to Oman. Mm-hmm. It's, when Australia decided to recognize Israel capital as Jerusalem, the Jordanians were not in favor. Mm. But Bahrain said, this is all right. It's, we have better friends today.
Colonel Ben Shalom?
This is something important.
Indeed.
A neighbor, a friend. Collaboration is excellent. It must be, because we share the same border, same interest. We do play this game with them, that we allow them to use this harsh rhetoric towards Israel, mainly for internal purposes. So probably our leadership think that it's a good idea to play along with this game, because in reality, it's not like Jordan has strong leverages on us, because again, we serve common interests. So the king of Jordan once in a while will say that we kill Palestinian babies, and we just turn a blind eye and move on with our excellent collaboration.
Well, we don't have a lot of time left, so I'll leave room for what General Kuperwasser mentioned, the relations between Israel and the Arab world, primarily, of course, Saudi Arabia and other countries surrounding Saudi Arabia. Mr. Oren, shortly.
Another important country, of course, is Egypt. And Egypt is not only the first Arab country to have recognized Israel and established diplomatic relations, but also the biggest, most powerful, most important Arab country. And long live President Sisi. Under President Sisi, military and intelligence cooperation is excellent. We have a common enemy in the Sinai, in the Wilayat Sinai, the Daesh branch. And of course, because he is against the Muslim Brotherhood, he's also against Hamas. So first of all, Egypt. And then come all the rest, which do not have yet diplomatic relations with Israel.
Open diplomatic relations. General Kuperwasser, to what degree is Iran the only component holding those relations to grow, or is there more interest to it?
To a large extent, it's based on the need to oppose the radicals, not only Iran. The radicals, both on the Shiite side, like Iran, Hezbollah, and on the Sunni side, like ISIS and Al-Qaeda and even the Muslim Brotherhood. And in this respect, in having the same list of enemies, these relations are pretty well based on common interests.
Indeed. Colonel Ben Shalom?
Here, too, I think that it's not that reality has changed that much. I think the strategic understanding of our neighbors, going all the way to the Gulf, has not changed when it comes to Israel. They don't consider us a threat. They think we're an asset for growth and for regional prosperity. What changed is that history took its course, time is passing, and slowly it enables them to show the world these possibilities. But again, I think it's only a matter of exposing this. I don't think this is a matter of this specific government. I don't think it's an achievement of Netanyahu from the last few months. It's a long process of exposure of the realities of the Middle East, where Israel is not the problem. It's part of a great solution for stability in the region.
Well, unfortunately, this is all the time that we have for today, and this is going to be the last program for 2018, so it's a good closing to get a little bit of points to understand better the situation and some topics that we've been also discussing on the Jerusalem Studio show. So I'd like to thank General Kuperwasser for being here today, Mr. Amir Oren, Colonel Ben Shalom, and I'd like to thank your viewers as well, and we will see you next time.
You just watched TV7 Jerusalem Studio. We encourage you to pray for the challenges raised in today's program. If you were blessed by our production, please consider supporting TV7 Israel. The details of our respective bank accounts for donations from Europe and the United States appear on the screen. Your generosity allows us to continue to serve God's calling, to broadcast content that truly matters through TV7 Israel from Jerusalem.